Now, I don't know about you, but being part of a family can be tough sometimes, especially if you have siblings. In my family, it was always a competition over who got the best spot. We'd argue about who got the front seat of the car, who had control of the TV remote, who got to be player one in Mario Kart, or even who got the biggest slice of cake. Of course, those discussions often involve some bargaining, a few sneaky tricks, and the occasional wrestling match to settle things once and for all. Families are full of love, but they're also a place where rivalries, mistakes, and all the rough edges come out. I think most of us know what it's like. We've all had those moments where family life has been far from perfect. Moments where we clash, fall short, or even say things that we regret. And yet, even in the middle of the chaos, family is still the place where we belong. The place where we're shaped, where we often discover both failure and forgiveness. That's why our passage this morning is so relatable. The story of Jacob and Esau is one filled with family drama. Their family was one that was full of favourites, rivalries, and mistakes. Jacob tricks his brother. Jacob deceives his father. He fractures the family in the process. And yet, what's remarkable in this is that God doesn't give up on Jacob. Despite the mess, God meets him, and God promises him blessing, protection, and a future. And that's where this story of Jacob fits into the series that we've been going along for the past few weeks as part of the narrative lectionary. This idea of Jehovah Jireh, our God provides. So over the past 2 weeks, we've looked at both God's provision through creation, as well as the way in which God provided for Abraham, both in times of joy in the birth of his son Isaac, and in times of fear and trembling when he was tested on the mountain. So as we move into this story of Jacob, we can see that Jacob might not have earned his blessing from God. In fact, he actually stole it from his brother. But yet God still blessed him. Right in the middle of Jacob's fear and failure, God shows up. And he says, I am with you. That's who God is. God is the one who provides, the one who opens a way when we can't see one. So our reading this morning gives us some insight into the story of Jacob and Esau, but there's a lot in that story. Now we could have stood here and read the whole 3 or 4 chapters, but the lectionary gave us a few select chapters, and this morning I'm going to kind of try and fill in the gaps for you a bit. So I thought it would be helpful to start with a bit of a summary of this whole saga of Jacob and Esau. So let's start right at the beginning of this story with the birth of Jacob and Esau. In fact, we're going to start just before they were born. So we get some idea of God's plan for Jacob. The Lord speaks to Jacob's mother Rebekah and says, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. We can see right from the start of this story that these brothers aren't going to fit into the typical mold where the older brother inherits everything. And this is seen as they're born even. We read that Esau was born first, strong and hairy. But right behind him came Jacob. And Jacob didn't just come out normally, he came out clinging to the heel of Esau. Their lives continued a lot like this pattern. We hear that Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So in just these few verses, we begin to get an idea and we begin to see just what this family is like. We see parents playing favourites. We see siblings who are complete opposites and don't get along. What a loving family. So as this story continues, we see the first of Jacob's tricky schemes. Jacob convinces Esau, who was hungry and desperate for food after returning from a hunting trip. He convinces him to give up his birthright in exchange for a bowl of stew. Now, clearly Esau has a taste for the dramatics. I mean, he can't be that hungry, can he? That his next words are, "Look, I'm about to die. What good is this birthright to me?" How dramatic of him. Surely no one can be that hungry that they're about to die. But in some ways it does show us exactly what Esau thinks of this family inheritance. He treats it as something cheap, something that can be easily traded away. Something that can be traded away to satisfy an immediate craving. Jacob, on the other hand, reveals just how determined he is to grasp this blessing, no matter what it cost him. Between them, we see a picture of two brothers, one careless with the promise of God, and the other striving to take hold of them by his own means. This brings us to the next part of the story. I told you it's a long story. And this is part of our reading for today. We see Isaac, who is old and going blind. He calls Esau to him so that he can bless him before he dies. Now, before the blessing, Isaac asked Esau to go hunting, to prepare a meal for him. Now his mother hears this, and Rebekah, who, as we heard earlier, prefers Jacob, convinces Jacob to disguise himself as Esau in order to take the blessing. In what I think is quite a funny scene, where he gets all this hair and goat skins, just in order to look like a hairy Esau. We hear that Isaac heard Jacob's voice and was a bit suspicious. It says the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Still deceived by the disguise, he eats the meal, lays his hands on Jacob, and gives him a blessing. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. So again, we see glimpses of the way that God's blessing is going to provide for Jacob, even though he wasn't the oldest son, even though he wasn't the one that would typically receive this blessing. So after being blessed by Isaac, Jacob decides to run away in order to avoid what might be coming from his brother. His brother isn't happy. And this brings us to the second part of our reading, where Jacob is truly blessed by God, as he witnesses God's presence through a dream. We hear that as Jacob slept, he dreamt of a stairway reaching from earth to heaven. And there at the very top was the Lord saying to him, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring." Does this sound a bit familiar? This is the same blessing that was given to Abraham that we heard about. But God added to this. He said, "I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." This is where God truly blesses Jacob. He reminds him of the promise that he made to his ancestors, to Abraham and Isaac. And in this moment, on an uncertain path, where Jacob doesn't know what's going to happen, he's fearful of what his brother might do to him. In this moment, God blesses Jacob. Even in the middle of fear, failure, uncertainty, God's provision is clear. He meets Jacob in the middle of his worry. He gives him reassurance and a promise. This is a key moment in this story of Jacob. It shows us how God's blessings don't depend on our actions. They come from God's faithfulness. Doesn't matter what we do, God will bless us. And we see in this moment that Jacob is actually aware of this blessing from God and just how special it is. When he wakes up, he proclaims, he says, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." After this passage, which we didn't hear this morning, we see Jacob acknowledging this by anointing a stone. In fact, it's the stone that he used as a pillow while he was sleeping for the dream. Imagine going to sleep on a stone. Wouldn't be that comfortable. Jacob takes the stone and creates a pillar. And he specifically goes out of his way to name this place as a reminder that God's presence is there in this specific place. Now, I'm not sure about you, but there have been times in my life where I can clearly see that God has been present. And maybe this story is a reminder to us to remember these times, to name them, claim them. Probably not with rocks like Jacob might have, but perhaps by reminding ourselves that these times are a way to see how God and God's blessings have been working throughout our lives. That's not the end of Jacob's journey. As we look back on this journey, we can see that Jacob didn't have everything sorted out. But even though he made mistakes, God still blessed him. God blessed Jacob in his weakness. Jacob had deceived his brother and his father to get something that wasn't rightfully his. He'd stuffed up, but God still chose to bless him. Jacob had encountered God's presence, even though he didn't deserve it. Jacob's story continues. After Bethel, Jacob spent many years in Haran, where God continued to bless him with a family and with wealth, despite ongoing struggles and conflicts. Eventually, God called him back home. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'd left my brother not knowing what he was like, a bit angry at me, be a bit scared to come back. Jacob was worried. He was worried about meeting Esau, scared that he might still be holding on to this grudge from many years ago, fearful of what he might do. But their reunion was anything but that. It wasn't marked with revenge. It was a moment of reconciliation. We hear how Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, and they wept. Despite all of the brokenness that was between them, God's kept his promises. He provided blessing, protection, and even reconciliation, showing that his purposes are never undone by us, never undone in the times that we stuff up, never undone by our weaknesses. So what might this story be telling us about God's provision? I think this story can help us to better understand and appreciate what God provides for us. We see throughout Jacob's story that he stumbles, he makes mistakes. Not just one mistake, but many mistakes. And yet God never abandons him. Instead, God continues to watch over him, continues to provide blessings for him. Not only for Jacob, but for the generations that would come after Jacob. This reminds us that God's blessing isn't fragile. It isn't dependent on us and our ability to get everything right, because we all stuff up. Instead, it comes from God's grace, God's faithfulness. Even when we fail, even when we make a mess of things, God is still the one who provides, the one who makes a way forward, the one who blesses us beyond what we deserve. God's blessing isn't about us getting it right. It's about his faithfulness. Even in Jacob's failure and fear, God says, I am with you. I will not leave you. That's who God is. Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. So don't count yourself out because of your mistakes. Don't think that God has given up on you. Instead, open your eyes to God's presence and provision, even in the mess. And just like Jacob, hopefully we'll be able to say that surely the Lord is in this place. Amen.